Welcome to Echo No More, clear, credible, court-ready documentation in high-conflict parenting. No hype, no legal jargon, no drama. I'm Dr. James. If you're new here, I'm really glad you found this space. This podcast is for protective parents navigating high-conflict custody situations, especially when the other parent is manipulative, emotionally unsafe, or unpredictable. I'm not a lawyer, and this podcast isn't legal advice. What I am is a parent who has lived through this system, and someone whose attorneys over and over again told me the same thing. Your documentation is excellent. They told me it made their job easier. They told me it protected my credibility, and they told me it changed how my case was received. That's why I'm sharing this. Not to teach you how to fight, but how to document calmly, clearly, and in a way courts actually understand. This is parent to parent, calm, grounded, and focused on protecting your child without losing yourself. I want to start today with a sentence that can feel deeply unsettling the first time you hear it. Telling the truth is not the same thing as being effective in court. That does not mean courts don't care about truth, and it absolutely does not mean your experience doesn't matter. What it means is this: courts are not built to receive truth the way humans are. Most parents come into documentation believing something very reasonable. If I just explain clearly enough, they'll understand. So you explain. You explain what happened, you explain the context, you explain the history, you explain how it felt, you explain why it mattered. And when that explanation doesn't land, you don't think the system isn't designed for this. You think, I must not have explained it well enough. So you explain more. This is where parents get trapped. Because explaining more feels like honesty, but in court documentation, it often weakens credibility rather than strengthening it. That realization was one of the hardest ones for me, and it's one my lawyers had to gently repeat more than once. They said things like, "You don't need to explain this. Let the pattern speak. This is already clear. Don't argue on paper." At first, that advice felt wrong, almost irresponsible, because when you've been harmed, explaining why something was harmful feels like telling the truth. But here's what courts are actually doing when they read documentation. They are not asking who suffered more, who is more emotional, who sounds more convincing. They are asking, is this consistent? Is this ongoing? Is this escalating or stabilizing? Is the child impacted? Is this parent reliable? That's it. Notice what's missing? There's no space for moral arguments, psychological explanations, character analysis, or emotional context. Not because those things aren't real, but because courts can't use them. Courts are decision-making systems. They need information that can be weighed, compared, and tracked over time. And here is the uncomfortable truth for protective parents. Emotion competes with facts on paper, even when the emotion is justified. When documentation contains emotional explanation, the reader's attention shifts from what happened to how the writer feels. And once that happens, credibility gets assessed through tone rather than content. That's not fair, but it is real. This is why two parents can describe the same event and one is believed more than the other, even if both are telling the truth. The difference isn't honesty, it's structure. Once I stopped explaining why something was harmful and started documenting what kept happening, something shifted. I wasn't minimizing harm, I was making it visible without asking the reader to argue with me. And that's when my attorneys started saying, "This is strong, this is clear, this speaks for itself." That phrase, "this speaks for itself," is everything. You do not want your documentation to sound like it's pleading to be believed. You want it to sound like it doesn't need to be. Here's another hard truth that parents rarely hear. The more you try to convince on paper, the less convincing it often becomes. Not because you're wrong, but because convincing language invites pushback. Facts don't argue. Patterns don't argue. Frequency doesn't argue. They simply exist. When documentation becomes explanation heavy, it opens the door for, "That's just your interpretation. That's subjective. That's emotional." When documentation stays factual and repetitive, the reader is left with only one question: why does this keep happening? And that is exactly the question you want them asking. This is also why parents often feel unheard in court, even when they're telling the truth. They are speaking a human language to a bureaucratic system. This podcast exists to help you translate, not suppress, your experience. Truth matters, but structure is what allows truth to land. Once you understand this, documentation stops feeling like self-defense and starts feeling like organization. And organization is calming. You're not being dishonest by being restrained. You are being strategic and protective. Before we close, I want to remind you of something important. You don't need to document everything. You don't need to be perfect. And you don't need to convince anyone with emotion. Calm documentation is power. If this episode helped you, you will find a full structured system in my guide, Clear, Credible, Court Ready. It's designed to support, not replace, your attorney. And if you want help turning everything you're documenting into something organized and usable, you can visit www.economocoaching.org to download my guide on how to create a clear, court-ready documentation binder. Take what helps, leave what doesn't, and most of all, take care of yourself. I'll see you next week.